Honestly, though, the breakdown really happens 9 times out of 10 between the manufacturing front office and their engineered product supply base. And most of that breakdown is in data.
Hello, and welcome back to the Manufacturing Connector. My name is Jim Mayer, and today we're talking about one of the most painful and expensive problems in manufacturing, inventory visibility. I'm joined by Andrew Johnson, CEO of ShelfAware, an RFID-powered digital VMI platform that's changing how suppliers and manufacturers manage inventory together. Andrew hasn't come to us from Silicon Valley. His roots are with a family industrial supply company business. And what he's built is grounded in real-world manufacturing pain and that human impact. Andrew Johnson, welcome to the Manufacturing Connector. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing wonderful. Jim, thank you for the introduction. It gave me tingles when you set up the inventory outage over that $10 part. It's like everybody's worst nightmare.
Right? And I've been in a lot of shops, and one of the things that I hear consistently from the floor is we trip over ourselves for parts that are pennies to dollars.
Yeah.
And from the shop floor perspective, that's one of the most painful things. I mean, there's a lot of pain that shop floor employees experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pay, respect, all of the things that I talk about on my other show, vulnerability, all of those things, the culture side of things.
Mm-hmm.
But to feel pain over not having the right tool when you need it is wild to me. And the fact that it's 2026 now and we're still talking about this blows my mind.
Yeah.
I have a good friend, a salesman who used to work for me. He was a machinist for a lot of years, and his whole thing was the most expensive part is the one that's not on the shelf. So
Correct.
I am so excited to talk to you, man, and have you lead us through what ShelfAware is all about and how you got there and how it changes lives.
Yeah, I'm pumped too. My genesis for this whole ShelfAware solution was from my family roots in the O-ring industry. And so in your intro, you used the $10 part. Most of our hair on fire moments with customers were over like a 10-cent part, which is, even more frustrating. It wasn't even an expensive item that was shutting down a manufacturing production line. It was pennies, like literally, 8.5 pennies. And it is mind-boggling that today we're still talking about this, but I think it just does point to the just unavoidable complexity of manufacturing. And if you've never been on a manufacturing assembly line, you don't understand how much has to come together for that pump or that motor or that car to come off the line and everything works, and do that on repeat day in and day out, with a huge staff. There's just a ton of moving parts. So once you understand the complexities, then you can understand how little things like O-rings, lubricants, fasteners, janitorial supplies, fall through the cracks and then end up gumming up the works. And so that was, I guess, in the beginning where it all started was, hey, how do we not just sell O-rings to manufacturing consumers, but how do we provide them the service level that they need so that they don't run out of those O-rings? And we didn't have an answer for many years. The market's answer has always been sales reps from the supplier's location visiting the consumer's location and doing an actual physical inventory audit with their eyeballs, or the consumer themselves putting, a lot of emphasis on inventory cycle counting. But again, that like over time, I've never seen that work because the manufacturing employees have kind of, in their mind, and justifiably so, much bigger fish to fry than staring at these little plastic bins or this shelf space and questioning whether or not they should buy more of something when it looks like they have a lot on the shelf currently. So it's like, it's a complex, nasty issue. And I think for decades, it's been a hot potato. So manufacturers have held on to that hot potato and then oftentimes get frustrated, toss it out their supply base and say, you guys figure it out. We're in the current era of suppliers handling the hot potato. And you're seeing a rise in vendor managed inventory. That's VMI. And that rise is really led by the market leader, which is the juggernaut, and that is Fastenal. So the dudes in the blue trucks, they by far suck up most of the oxygen in the room because since the 60s, it's been the drum that they've been beating. ShelfAware is a relatively new player to the scene that's looking to use technology as opposed to dudes in blue shirts and trucks solving that problem. We're trying to solve the problem with technology more efficiently.
I love it. And as somebody who worked for that dudes in blue trucks or blue shirts with trucks company and another industrial company that did vendor managed inventory in my previous world, this is something that I can really appreciate because it changes that dynamic on the shop floor from a push to a pull kind of inventory managed system, right? We see manufacturers all the time who are running around 10 cent, $10 part when they have VMI at their capability or at their disposal, their capacity goes up. And what I love about you and ShelfAware is this whole notion that we can do it using technology and uh, eliminate some of the human error that exists. So excited to talk to you about all of this today. We've heard about you and the O-rings and the familial history a little bit with that. Was there a moment that you realized that traditional VMIs and inventory practices were, for lack of a better term, fundamentally broken?
Yeah. Yeah. For us, it was pressure from our longtime customers who were essentially demanding we come up with this service level. And when we were so traditionally, we as a company never offered vendor managed inventory. We always shirked it because the traditional VMI was not a win-win. And I think efficiency is going to be the big winner in the next decade as we look to press the gas pedal on US manufacturing again. And for my brothers and I that were running this little family business, this little O-ring business, we were hyper obsessed with efficient solutions and just could not bring ourselves to deploy traditional VMI. And so I was at that kind of juncture. This would have been 2015 when this longtime customer said, "Hey, provide a VMI or get out." And we were kind of forced to reevaluate our approach to the whole vendor managed inventory solution through this lens of hyper efficient solutions. And so we went back to the drawing board. And I think the very first thing we did that was important, and the only reason we could really do this is because we didn't have any experience with vendor managed inventory personally, is we tossed the bins out. So we took a solution to the whiteboard and said, forget bins. Don't start with bins. Just start with how are we going to track this inventory in the most efficient manner? And because so we thought beyond the bins. And I think a lot of other vendor managed inventory solutions today are stuck with the bins still in their equation by default. And so with ShelfAware, we landed on a RFID smart label that can be applied to any product packaging and knew that everything that the engineered B2B wholesale space sold is packaged when it shows up at the consumer's facility, because a lot of times this stuff's custom. Like these are not off the shelf products you're going to find at Ace Hardware or Lowe's or Home Depot. They're just
Right.
they're highly specialized because a lot of the production left in America is highly specialized products. These are products that are going to keep people in the air on man lifts and keep our infrastructure moving and power plants online. So, it's not commodity stuff. It's pretty highly engineered stuff. So we focused on making the packaging smart, and that was step one that really put us in a position to succeed. So our very first 2015 installation was about smart packaging. It was applied to the O-ring supply chain we knew really well. And we implemented a beta in a gearbox manufacturer and had no idea what we were doing. That was the genesis, was homebrewed. We knew we had it figured out with smart packaging, and that was about it. And then deploy. And then, the rest was the next part of the story.
Got it. Awesome. So has this process changed the way that you think about technology in manufacturing, going from an O-ring distributor to this VMI company? Has it changed the way you look at technology in this space?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it totally changed. every lens I look through. And I'm part of a manufacturing company myself now. So I actually just started a manufacturing company that's 100% built around an efficient solution and has everything to do with efficiency and has everything to do with user experience. So yeah, it's like part of my DNA now. I look at every business through this efficiency lens and know that if it's not efficient, it doesn't have a future.
Andrew, where inside manufacturing plants does the inventory management typically break down from your expertise in the area?
Yeah, people are trying to assign blame in the complex manufacturing arena, and I think that the blame incorrectly gets placed on the blue collar production folks. They're usually pointed at as the problem to any solution that's put in place, whether it's a card pull Kanban, or a vending machine, or a vendor managed inventory system that's built around bin management and visually inventory audits of bins, because I think that's wrong. The blue collar folks, in my opinion, that are on the production floor are literally just trying to build. They get paid usually around efficiency metrics, bonused out on how much they produce, and if the factory's not producing quality products at an acceptable rate, nobody gets what they want as far as compensation goes. And so everybody's concerned about that. And so the blue collar folks, with that concern in mind, are doing things that would help them produce things faster and more efficiently. So I have seen like the biggest mistakes when blue collar guys or gals with great intentions walk into an inventory area and take a whole bin of product, walk away to some manufacturing line or cell, thinking they're going to cut some steps out of their workday because they pull this product frequently, and they don't, realize that in the broader ecosystem that product's used in a variety of other assemblies, and now it's essentially they've taken maybe 2 or 3 months worth of usage to their own personal location or to their line or cell, and so that's typically where people point towards the breakdown. I think honestly, though, the breakdown really happens 9 times out of 10 between the manufacturing front office and their engineered product supply base. And most of that breakdown is in data. Traditionally, the suppliers of these engineered products, whether it's lubricants or fasteners or hoses or fittings, they're all looking to the manufacturing consumer for better data. And the manufacturing consumer really cannot produce that data because all of their MRP systems are focused on production side workflows and not on supply chain analytics, and usually have very weak data to provide to the suppliers. And I think usually it's in the form of some forecast. They'll release some production forecast. It's often wrong. It's usually riddled with holes. They're incomplete. They're often delivered for a few months, and then the delivery stops. People change in the front office and the forecast stops showing up to the supplier's email inbox, or the supplier, gets a new sales guy and he's not looking at the data or interpreting the data, and then it all falls apart. So what we knew we needed was, as a supplier, we needed to essentially spy on the consumer's physical shelves of inventory. And if we could, what we really wanted to do was, essentially put our sales rep and just have them live at the factory, and stare at the shelves. But that's obviously not practical. So we had to come up with another solution: how to spy on our customers, how to extract better data from their day-to-day activities that would educate our best attempts to purchase product for them that right now in the global supply chain is changing every month. Where are you going to get it? What regional war is going to disrupt us next? Those things are very, very difficult. So we just knew we needed better data. We needed to spy on the manufacturer, and we needed to cut out, their duty to provide us that data. It's just never historically worked. And it's just up to the supplier to figure out how to access that data or create that data. So we had to create that data by spying on the consumer.
Got it. Makes total sense. So what kind of hidden costs exist on the shop floor, right? That most manufacturers have just accepted as quote unquote normal.
Yeah. And people look at a lot of cost structures on the shop floor. That the obvious ones are cash on hand that's buried in overstocking of inventory products. That's a cardinal sin of any VMI. Traditional VMIs, because they rely on that sales reps factory visits or shop visits, and they're infrequent. The solution has always traditionally been like, well, if they use this product a lot, we just put insane amounts on the shelf because the sales rep knows he's going to be on vacation next month. And so he doesn't want them to stock out. So he puts crazy amounts of inventory on the shelf. That's a big one as far as cost goes because that cash is captive and you can't get it back. The other one I think that people don't understand is all these VMI programs that are wildly inefficient that involve sales reps driving around and truck all day to these different locations and also require that sales rep to have a branch location typically close to the manufacturing facility. Branch location costs are extremely high. All those costs that the manufacturer is putting on the supplier to maintain stock levels at these kind of remote manufacturing facilities, those just get buried in product cost. So they usually are not charged like an outright vendor managed inventory fee as a separate line item. Those costs are all baked right into the cost of the product. So that 10-cent O-ring can quickly become $1.10 a piece because you got a guy that's smart and has a ton of experience, and he's literally spending 27 hours of his 40 hours or 50 hours a week in a truck driving around to small town, backwoods, Kansas, Missouri, Iowa. Like, that's weird. It's crazy where these manufacturing facilities wind up, but they're not usually on the most direct route. And so you have a lot of miles to cover to get to that facility to maintain that inventory quantity. And those costs, they add up really quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a lack of trust or a transparency strain between manufacturers and suppliers that exists right now?
Yes. Yeah. A lot of trust is a big issue across our whole culture. But yeah, historically, and I keep saying historically because I'm trying to say what's always happened, what's still happening is once the consumer kind of relents and says, okay, you're right, we're never going to be great at tracking all of these little tiny A, B, and sometimes C class items that we don't use very often, but when we need them, we really need them. And we're bad at that. And so we're going to turn that over to our supply base. And we put a traditional VMI in place. Not only did the supply chain procurement costs go up significantly because of all those hidden costs we were just talking about, but now you're relying on a guy in a truck to show up on a frequent basis and check your inventory. What happens, and it's a little insidious over time, and this is where the trust breakdown. The supplier ends up having all the data on the supply chain in the traditional vendor managed inventory. So these big players we were previously talking about that are outside with this network of guys in trucks, they learn a lot about these little items. And over the years, the manufacturing consumer says, we haven't worried about those in 3 or 4 years. Actually, we don't even have data on them anymore. We don't even know what's in those bins necessarily. We've changed engineering groups 2 or 3 times. We've lost all the component level drawings. But don't worry, our supplier has all that information. Once the supplier gets them over the barrel, there has been a lot of bad actors that have raised prices knowing they have a captive consumer that is completely dependent on their system. And so my brothers and I were never interested in creating that sort of dynamic because those eventually are solved through really messy conflicts, and the consumer will be forced to rip out their supplier who they used to trust, don't trust anymore because they found out that they're getting taken advantage of or perceived that they were getting taken advantage of in a variety of areas. And so that breakup is nasty, messy, and my brothers and I had no desire to put ourselves, if we were going to do this service level, we were not going to be put in a position of compromise like this. And so from the beginning of the ShelfAware system, we created this data supply chain, this data feed by spying on the manufacturing, consumers, inventory, consumption habits on a real-time basis. So once the data was created, we created a web-based platform, shelfawarevmi.com, where the consumers on the ShelfAware VMI system can go see all of their data. So once we install ShelfAware, we provide that data to the supplier and the consumer in a transparent data feed. And that was all to provide transparency to minimize or prevent conflicts from happening in the future where the manufacturing consumer says, hey, you're putting too much inventory on the shelf. And then the supplier can say, well, hey, we're only putting what you've removed off the shelf back on the shelf. Here's the data. Okay.
Got it. Makes total sense. So how is ShelfAware different from the existing platforms out there? And what is RFID digital VMI?
Yeah, good question. So we covered a couple of ways it's different. We get away from the bins. You don't necessarily need bins, but you could have bins. We focus on smart packaging. We provide a lot of data transparency, so that's a big differentiator. Is we're providing data to both parties in the supply chain. The other big differentiators, the biggest one is probably how we have scaled the platform. So in traditional software as a service, well, traditionally software sold, and we didn't have a lot of interest in selling the solution to industrial suppliers because we knew, being industrial suppliers, that we didn't really have a software development background to keep said software up to date. And we knew that our consumers on the supply side, and really on the consumer side, are not that sophisticated. So we offer the platform in a monthly service model and license the system to industrial suppliers. So that's becoming really interesting because we have a growing network of supplier licensees that are starting to work together on the platform. So ShelfAware is installed in a manufacturing facility, and it works really, really well for, let's say, O-rings as number one supplier. And then the consumer says, hey, we would like to apply ShelfAware to the next product vertical. What's your next biggest pain point? And they say, well, it's lubricants. Okay, well, we can get a lubricant supplier in here on the ShelfAware platform, and they can all operate on the same piece of infrastructure. All the data can be driven into the same web-based application. So, a couple of years go by and the manufacturing consumer has 5 or 6 of their key suppliers on the ShelfAware platform, all operating on the same set of rules with the same data infrastructure, the same hardware infrastructure, all benefiting from the supply chains. That collaborative approach is extremely different than traditional software solutions that are sold, and then individual suppliers kind of build moats around those solutions and offer them, but nobody else can play on that piece of software. So it becomes kind of not very scalable. So that's probably our biggest differentiator. Ultimately, in the long run, in the marketplace, the RFID piece for us is not really that unique. It's an old technology. We stumbled into it at a time when the price per smart label was dropping like a rock in 2015. And the main driver of that cost decrease in radio, so RFID stands for radio frequency identification. And the main reason that those smart tags are not only getting a lot better from how far away you can read them, how much data you can put on them, how you can encrypt them. They have a lot more features, and they're getting really crazy in the RFID space about functionality. But at the same time that the function's going up, the cost is plummeting. And the main driver is Walmart. So on the retail side of things, Walmart, actually a long time ago, decade, maybe 15 years ago, tried to adopt RFID, failed miserably because they're too premature. And then more recently, they took another run at it, and it's going really, really well. So Walmart's adoption of RFID, embedded RFID tags on every sellable unit, has driven the volumes in production for these little tiny, I guess to explain exactly what they are, it's a tiny little microchip that has a bunch of squiggly metal applied to it. And that little squiggly metal is an antenna. And it's just that little microchip's emitting a small radio frequency that's read by a radio receiver and translated into a small piece of data. In the instance of ShelfAware, it's always this ShelfAware package ID number that translates back to our own database about what's in the package. And you can put a ton of package information, the color of the product, the size, the shape, the supplier part number, the customer part number. You can link it to a drawing. You could link it to a certification like an NSF or some sort of oil and gas cert or aerospace certification, quality certification. All that can be linked through this little tiny piece of data that's just transmitted via radio waves. And they now cost pennies. They used to cost dollars, 15, 20 years ago. Now they're costing you can get RFID chips down for like 3 to 5 cents each at volumes. So putting them in packages, what ShelfAware does, it drives a couple pennies into the cost of a package of products. In the case of O-rings, it's about as cheap as you can get. A package of O-rings at wholesale is going to cost you a couple dollars. And so we knew that whatever data collector we went with, the lowest common denominator is probably O-rings as far as the cheapest product these expensive assemblies consume on a per piece price. And so if we could tolerate the cost to make a smart package in the O-ring space, we could tolerate it anywhere. So it was kind of again, I think a lot of entrepreneurialism and a lot of innovation is about right place, right time, For us, it was we entered the RFID data collection space when the tag price was dropping, and we were also the lowest common price-wise denominator in the supply chain of O-rings. And so those two things combined for us to come up with a really inexpensive solution that works more broadly. We just didn't know it at the time that we're going to apply it to these other product verticals.
One of the things that I love that you mentioned just a moment ago is how easy it is to add other vendors to this platform, to the ShelfAware platform. Because one of the challenges, and it's been a decade since I left industrial distribution, right? Or nearly a decade. So it's been a while. But one of the biggest challenges I saw when I was in distribution is traditional VMIs were great for the vendors we had relationships with, the vendors that we sold. But anytime my customers or my salesperson's customers wanted to manage something external from the ecosystem of vendors and products that I sold, it was next to impossible, or quite frankly, most of the time, just a no.
Yeah.
So what you do in bringing that ease of use, that common platform across vendors for a manufacturer, creates a much stickier VMI for them. And it really truly becomes aware, at least to me, that this is a solution for the manufacturers, not necessarily a solution for the distributor to get more sales volume. Does that make
Yes.
sense?
100%. What you're really getting at is the win-win.
Right.
And that the old school approach to vendor managed inventory, frankly, was a losing proposition for the supplier. And the only suppliers in our marketplace that could make it a win were the giants because they had the scale. They needed 2,000 branch locations and 10,000 sales reps to make the costs of doing traditional vendor managed inventory make sense. And so it precluded or excluded all of the smaller independent suppliers from that equation. They cannot do vendor managed inventory services and win. It's just not in their math. And so the win-win is when the supplier's happy to put a vendor managed inventory system in place because the costs are manageable, they're known, and they're scalable. And the supplier can then go to the marketplace and offer it as a value-added service in good conscience, knowing that their prices aren't going to have to go up drastically. They're not going to have to open a branch location. They're not going to have to take out loans. So the win-win just hadn't existed up until technology entered into the vendor managed inventory space. It was always a win for the consumer and a win for the giant suppliers. Everybody else was left out. That leads me to like this, and this is a little more. What's next, I think, is for the industry is a little more difficult to explain. So I think the simplest way I can explain it is, to me, I think technology, AI, RFID, IoT, that's the Internet of Things, all of that innovation driven by technology adoption in the manufacturing space is going to level the playing field. We've been in an era of consolidation where the big guys have just gotten a lot bigger, and it's squeezed the independents, not just suppliers, but independent manufacturers. When I first started for my dad back in, I'm not that old, but 809, I was still visiting customers who were out in a cornfield in the middle of Kansas, Nebraska, or Iowa, who's, I was talking to guys whose grandfather started the company because he had an idea about some tractor attachment, 65 years ago, and started building them in his barn, and boom, here we were. Those guys got bought up. So there's tons of consolidation on the manufacturing side that's happened. And then there's a lot of consolidation on the supplier side. Now technology is leveling that playing field where we can offer service levels like the big guys, but at costs the independent can afford and create the win-win. So I think what's going to happen is, or what we're driving towards at ShelfAware, is the ability to link specialized suppliers. Because for 50 years, really the big VMI pushers were the generalists. These were suppliers that sold everything from soup to nuts. They've gotten so big that they've become, from a supply standpoint, as a supplier, they've gotten good at everything and they're kind of great at nothing. And we need a supply chain that can offer expertise in every product category. Then we need a collection of specialists. And if you have software that's bought and then, just sold to one guy and those costs don't scale, then it doesn't allow everybody to work together on it, then we can't get a collection of specialists. So ShelfAware allows a collection of specialists who are uniquely suited at their individual product verticals. So now I have a hose expert, a O-ring expert, a fastener expert, a lubrication expert, but they're all working collectively on one low-cost supply chain solution where the consumer can see a one-stop place for data, and it provides a platform for this collection of independent, advanced, specialized suppliers to operate and look and feel like a big generalist, but they're actually separate companies.
Yeah. Awesome, man. I love that. A lot of companies, you're talking about technology, and a lot of companies on the manufacturing side have worked on spreadsheets for so long. And we're starting to see a lot more move into ERP, MES, MRP systems. Automation at your level, at the shelf level, right, can really accentuate those other platforms. So the MRP, the ERP, the MES system, is that a valid statement? I mean, is this something that can take those platforms that manufacturers are now adopting and using ShelfAware? It just pours gasoline on the fire and makes it an even more robust platform?
Yeah, it can. It kind of depends on the direction the manufacturer wants to go. I think what it would allow the industry to do is get back to producing MRP or manufacturing resource planning softwares that focus on the manufacturing aspects and don't have to account for the supply chain piece of it. When you try and do too much with software, which I think the answer in software development that you'll get from developers is always yes. So when you ask them, hey, can you, fly me to the moon and back? Sure, yeah, we can do that. Because it's kind of true. Like they can't do it. It's just like time and money. Like how many developers do you want to sink on this? So the MRPs have gotten so broad they've tried to tackle the inventory thing, but it's just almost a problem that's best left solved by this third party solution. And then where we can help them in the long run is we can build an API back to our very specific inventory and supply chain data stream that they could suck back into their MRP at any time. So we've made the platform data approachable, whether that's through an API, which is a kind of a permanent connection you do have to maintain, where the two databases, the two systems talk to each other in a very formal way, or we've made all of our data and ShelfAware exportable. So if you're operating on a spreadsheet or you have a department that wants to produce a report real quick, you can click on any set of data in the ShelfAware platform and download it in a variety of file types. So it's just about being accessible. We do have to have incredibly rich data, but then it has to be accessible. And if you want to push it back into your MRP, we have to obviously account for that.
Can you pull up ShelfAware and share your screen and show us a little bit about the platform, some of the key functionality?
All right, so this is the ShelfAware web-based application. ShelfAwareVMI.com will take you to this login screen. It's all email-based, so you would plug in your email address and get yourself into the ShelfAware site. I'm going to use a demo, which is not very exciting, but again, you have to keep in mind this information. I mean, we have a lot of deployments now, and typically industrial suppliers don't really want to share their entire customer base. So it's more fun to look at live data, but I can't. We're logged in right now to a consumer. So this would be from the manufacturer's perspective when they log into the ShelfAware platform, and it takes them to this recent scan screens by default, but you can change what screen you come to by default. And the recent scans would typically display inventory items that have come off of your shelf in recent history. And you can look at specific scanners, whether that's on the shop floor or some production line, and download that information into this in a real-time view. The customer item screen, from the consumer standpoint, would give them everything that they have on the shelf. So this would be real-time data, And it would not just show them one supplier, they would give them an aggregate view of every supplier. So in this case, Jimbo's Part Emporium is the top 3 products here. And then the next one are from Demo Manufacturer Inc. You got another one here, OEM, MOA. So these are all individual products delivered to the manufacturer shelf, and it's going to show you real-time on-hand quantities and then show you some package dynamics, like the package quantity on this particular product here is 1. The shelf quantity is set to 5. So what we're trying to say there is simply, we'd like to keep 5 on the shelf. Currently have 5, so you're not doing any more. These red boxes are stockouts. They don't happen often, but when they do, we want to highlight them, so we turn them bright red, and we can change the colors as well for folks. And then you can essentially just scroll down through this entire giant list of products from a consumer perspective and check on everything that might be on your shelf. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, this would be, again, the customer's perspective. And in this scenario, that's a manufacturer consumer. If we log out real quick, I'll log back into a supplier side demo.
And what I love about that is it removes any emotion, right? When you have that min max level, it eliminates emotion from replenishment decisions, right? It makes it so that there's hard, fast data that is available for procurement teams to be able to say, oh, we're out of this. We are below our min level. Let's get something going.
Correct. Yeah, it's all data driven.
Well, how does this system, as you come back and out of the demo here, how does this system free up people to do higher value, more meaningful work in the companies that have it deployed?
Yeah, it's really automating the mundane. So a lot of these products are used every day, and we don't want to have to put a bunch of people on these mundane products. So automating the mundane is the big one. We're allowing customer service and supply chain professionals to set aside a huge chunk of their supply chain as quote unquote mundane, because the data is going to manage that for them, and they can pay close attention to the exceptions, because we can't answer those exceptions. There's always going to be instances where a manufacturing consumer calls you from Central America out of the blue and orders 100 units of something, and you had no plan for that. So we allow them to focus on those exceptions, and the rest of it, kind of their default inventory, just flows based on data, not on people.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. As we wrap up here, Andrew, what's one of the biggest lessons you've learned building this platform? Business lesson, people lesson, human lesson, whatever that lesson is. What's the biggest lesson?
Patience. Yeah. I mean, it's a hard lesson to learn. When you're a hard driving entrepreneur, there's things about this industry that I love and hate. One of those, it's a necessary evil, but it's all this specification and engineering. It's incredible how much engineering and how much thought and how much intellectual property goes into producing reliable devices that we depend on every day for food and power and infrastructure and road construction. And it's like, it's easy to get, as an innovator trying to change a space quickly, I get frustrated with how long it takes to get some of these deals off the ground and get some of these consumers to just even consider making innovations to their supply chain, because predominantly they have real concerns about some of the engineering hurdles. And so that's had to, causes me to be extremely patient. I'm hopeful that the market will continue to adopt, but I also understand that it just takes time, to do it right and carefully and not shut people down and continue to make quality products. And so that has to be our number one focus. And that's taught me a lot of patience, but we are making steady progress. It's going to take a while to get the U.S. manufacturing footprint fired up. And, maybe we are hitting the gas pedal, but it's going to take a bit to get to kind of our cruising speed again. So yeah, that's, for me as a young entrepreneur, patience has been my number one lesson.
Got it. Awesome, man. Andrew, what haven't I asked you that you want to share with the audience?
I don't know. I mean, I have a lot I could share. I don't know if it's on point or on topic. I am generally optimistic, and I'm excited about the near-term future of U.S. prospects. I travel a lot globally, and every time I go overseas, I come back, and I'm still happy to be an American. And be part of this system, and I do have a lot of hope for it, and I'm continuing to be patient and be a part of putting that new manufacturing future together. So I guess I just encourage everybody to, take the same perspective. Does take time to put this back together in a really quality ways. Just be a part of that change, and yeah, we'll see each
Awesome.
other down the road.
Absolutely, man. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. Please go visit shelfawarevmi.com to see how RFID digital VMI works in the real world. Check them out, see if they're the right solution for you. Also, while you're out on the interwebs, make sure you subscribe to the Manufacturing Connector on YouTube for more stories about the tools that make life in manufacturing a little bit better for the people who are working on your shop floors. Until next time, have a great day. Thanks for being here. Keep making things.